To the outside world, I am the kind of woman people assume has no problems worth mentioning. 31 years old, VP of Operations at Hargrove and Cell Hospitality Group, the company my grandfather built from a single bed and breakfast in Vermont into a portfolio of 14 boutique hotels across the Northeast. I drive a sensible car. I return emails at midnight. I have never once been late to a board meeting. What people don't know is that for the past 8 months, I have been quietly, methodically, and completely alone in my marriage. I didn't know that yet on the morning everything changed. I thought I was just having a Tuesday. It was the first week of November, and we were 48 hours from the soft launch of our newest property, the Alder 10, a 1920s landmark building we'd spent 2 years and $11 million converting into a 112-room hotel in downtown Providence, Rhode Island. I had barely slept. I had a coffee stain on my blazer from the drive-in and a headache that started somewhere behind my left eye and had not moved in 4 days. I walked into the lobby at 7:15 a.m., carrying my laptop bag, my phone, a folder of punch list items, and another coffee because the first one was now on my blazer. The lobby was beautiful. 15-foot ceilings. Original terrazzo floors we'd spent a fortune restoring. A floral arrangement on the reception desk that cost more than my first car. I remember standing just inside the entrance and feeling, for one brief and quiet moment, proud. Then someone walked directly into me. Not bumped, not brushed. Walked. Full body, shoulder first, like I wasn't there. The coffee went everywhere. Across my hand, down the front of my jacket, onto the folder I was holding. I sucked in a breath from the heat of it. "Watch it," said the person who had walked into me. I looked up. She was maybe 24, 25. Long, dark hair, a blazer that still had the fold lines from being unpacked that morning, a lanyard around her neck that said, Alderton Hotel, SM Staff Trainee. She was looking at her phone. She hadn't even stopped walking. "Excuse me?" I said. She did stop then, turned around, looked me up and down in the way certain people do when they have decided, before a single word is exchanged, that you are beneath them. I said, "Watch it. I'm late for a meeting." I looked down at my hand. A red welt was already forming across my knuckles where the coffee had hit. "You just spilled hot coffee on me," I said. She sighed. Actually sighed, like I was the inconvenience here. It was an accident. "Can you just... I don't have time for this right now. Do you know who my fiancé is?" I blinked. "I'm sorry." "My fiancé. He's the general manager of this hotel. So if you're planning to make some kind of scene, I would think really carefully about that." She said it the way people say things when they believe the name they're about to drop is a grenade. Fingers loose. Chin up. Eyes already glazing over with boredom at whatever my response was going to be. I thought about my grandfather. He used to say that the fastest way to learn who someone really is to watch how they behave when they think they have power over you. I thought about the $11 million. I thought about the terrazzo floors. I said, very calmly, "What's his name?" "Harrison Webb," she said. "General manager. So." I nodded slowly. I set what remained of my coffee down on the reception desk. I took a handkerchief from my jacket pocket. An actual handkerchief. Yes, my grandmother gave him to me. I will not apologize. And I blotted my hand. Then I took out my phone and I called my husband. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, I'm just heading in." "Harrison," I said. "There's someone in the lobby who says she's your fiancé. She'd like me to know that you're the general manager of this hotel. I thought you should come down and clear that up." There was a pause, a very specific kind of pause, the kind that lasts less than 2 seconds and contains an entire conversation. "I'll be right there," he said. I hung up. I looked at her. She was staring at me with her mouth slightly open. "He's on his way," I said. Her name, I would learn later, was Kelsey. Not the Kelsey in my contacts. That's my college roommate. We still do brunch every other month. She is a perfectly lovely person. This was a different Kelsey. Kelsey Farrow, 23 years old, recently relocated from Atlanta, currently employed on a temporary event staffing contract that had been arranged, I would also learn later, by my husband. He came around the corner from the East Corridor 3 minutes later. He was wearing the jacket I'd given him for his birthday. Charcoal gray, slim cut, and he had the particular expression on his face that I had started recognizing over the past year without fully understanding what it meant. Careful, arranged, like someone who has already decided what they're going to say. He saw her first. Something moved across his face, alarm, then something faster, something that tried to become neutral before I could read it clearly. He didn't quite manage it. Then he saw me. "Sasha," he said. "Hi," I said. "I can explain." She said, "You're her fiancé?" I said. I kept my voice very even. I had learned in 15 years of professional life that evenness is more unsettling than volume. That's a pretty specific claim. Either it's true or it isn't. Which is it? The lobby was not empty. That was the thing about this particular moment. We were 48 hours from a soft launch. There were contractors. There were hotel staff in training. There were 2 people from our PR firm setting up near the bar. Everyone had gone very still in the way that people go still when they are trying to appear as though they are not paying attention to something. Harrison looked at Kelsey. Something passed between them. Kelsey, to her credit, did not back down. She walked toward him and stood close to him, too close, the way you stand next to someone when you are trying to prove a point about proximity. "She was rude to me," she said. "I came down here to— You walked into me," I said. "You spilled coffee on my hand, and then you told me to watch where I was going." I was distracted, Kelsey. Harrison said her name quietly, and it was that. Just the way he said it. The familiarity, the particular weight of it that told me everything I needed to know. I had been married to Harrison Webb for 5 years. We met when I was 25 and he was 28, and he was managing a Kimpton property in Boston where my company was hosting a conference. He was charming and competent, and he made me laugh. And when my grandfather passed and left me the company 2 years later, Harrison was the person who sat with me at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning while I went through financial documents and held my hand when it got to be too much. I promoted him to GM of our flagship property in Boston 3 years ago. I gave him the Alderton project because I believed in him. I believed in him. "How long?" I asked. He said nothing. "Harrison, how long?" Kelsey was looking between us. "I wasn't," the woman in scrubs elaborated. The slow reassessment of who I actually was in relation to this lobby, this hotel, this man. The lanyard around her neck said trainee. The folder in my burned hand said Hairgrove and cell operations. A lurch and a lunch. Some things announce themselves without you having to say a word. "Are you?" She started. "Sasha Hargrove," I said, "VP of Operations. My grandfather built this company." I paused. "And that is my husband." The silence that followed was the loudest I have ever heard in a hotel lobby. It turned out to be 8 months. That's what Harrison told me later, in the conference room on the 2nd floor, with the door closed and the city of Providence going about its business through the windows behind him. 8 months. It started in March, when Kelsey had been brought on to assist with an event at our Newport property. It had continued quietly, he said, like that was a point in his favor. Through spring and summer and the early weeks of fall, he had helped arrange her placement at the Alderton because he wanted her nearby for the launch. He said, "I was going to tell you, after the launch, I didn't want to blow everything up before the launch." I looked at him. "You were protecting the launch." "I was protecting you," he said. "The stress you've been under, Stop, I said. He stopped. I have thought about this moment many times since. About what I felt sitting across from him, with my burned hand on the table and the terrazzo floors 2 stories beneath us, and $11 million of my grandfather's legacy in the walls around me. I expected to feel devastated. I had loved this man. I had trusted him with everything, professionally, personally, in ways I have never entirely trusted anyone, and I did feel something enormous. But it wasn't quite what I expected. Mostly, I felt clear. There is a particular kind of clarity that arrives when the thing you were afraid of finally happens, when the suspicion you have been carrying for months, the small, quiet, terrible suspicion you refuse to name because naming it would make it real, turns out to be true. You stop bracing. You stop the constant low-level work of not knowing. All that energy comes back to you at once, and you realize you have more of it than you thought. You need to call your lawyer, I said. Not mine. Yours, Sasha. We'll get through the launch. I'm not mine. Yours, Sasha. We'll get through the launch. I'm not torching 2 years of work over this. But after Friday, I want you to move your things out of the house. He stared at me. I think he expected me to cry. People often expect me to cry. I need to go check on the 3rd-floor corridor lighting, I said. There's a punch list issue and I have a contractor meeting at 9. I stood up, picked up my folder, still damp, slightly warped, and I left. I will say this about the next 48 hours. I got through them. The Alderton soft launch went beautifully. The terrazzo floors looked extraordinary in the evening light. Our PR contact posted something on Instagram about the floral arrangements that got 4,000 likes by Saturday morning. I shook hands and made conversation and nodded at the right moments, and at no point did I fall apart in front of anyone. I did, at one point, step into the linen storage room on the 4th floor, lean against a shelf of bath towels, and cry for approximately 4 minutes. Then I wiped my face, checked my reflection in my phone camera, and went back out. Harrison ran the event floor the way he always had, professionally, attentively, without letting anything show. We had built something together, the two of us. That was the part that kept catching in my chest. The woman in scrubs. The woman in scrubs. And this person I had built it with had also, apparently, been someone else entirely for the past 8 months. Kelsey did not appear at the launch. I found out on Wednesday that her temporary contract had been quietly ended by our HR department. Whether Harrison did that or someone else did, I don't know. I didn't ask. What I did find out, over the following 2 weeks, as my attorney began the discovery process for the divorce, was considerably more. Harrison had approved a series of vendor contracts at the Alderton through a third-party events company called Farrow & Pine Consulting, a company I had never heard of, a company that, when my attorney's paralegal ran a basic search, turned out to have been registered in Delaware 4 months ago with a single listed officer. Kelsey Farrow. $63,000 in catering and event planning fees paid out of the Alderton's pre-opening budget to a company owned by the woman my husband was engaged to while still married to me. I sat with that number for a long time. $63,000. My grandfather used to say that you don't really know what someone is made of until you see what they do when no one is watching. Harrison had thought no one was watching. 48 hours before the biggest launch of his career, he thought the paperwork would get buried in the launch chaos, and no one would ever look closely enough. He didn't know me very well, apparently. My attorney filed the divorce petition in late November. The financial misconduct piece went to our company's legal team separately. That's a different process, a different set of documents, a different conversation. What I will say is that the vendor contracts were voided, the funds were flagged for recovery, and Harrison Webb's position as general manager of the Alderton Hotel was quietly eliminated in a restructuring announcement the week before Thanksgiving. He called me 3 times in December. I answered once. "I'm sorry," he said. I know that doesn't cover it. It doesn't, I said. But I appreciate that you said it. There was a pause. He asked how I was doing. I told him I was fine. I wasn't entirely lying. The thing about being raised in a family business is that work has always been the thing I know how to hold on to. When my grandfather died, I threw myself into the quarterly reports. When my mother got sick 2 years ago, I reorganized the company's entire vendor management system, color-coded, cross-referenced, the most efficient thing we've ever built. It's not a healthy coping mechanism, my therapist has told me this multiple times, but it is mine. I spent January restructuring the Aldertons operations team. I promoted a woman named Dana from our Boston property. She'd been our rooms division manager for 4 years, and I had never once heard her raise her voice or miss a deadline. I told her she was interim GM and that the interim part was negotiable. She bought me a coffee mug that said boss and put it on my desk. I use it every day. February was the divorce. Rhode Island is a no-fault state, which means it's cleaner than it sounds, though it still costs money and time and a particular kind of emotional labor that I don't have a good word for. My attorney is named Patricia, which is a name on the list of names I'm not supposed to say, so I'll just call her my attorney, and she was meticulous and fair, and I am very grateful for her. Harrison signed everything in February. I think he was ready for it to be done. I was too. Here is something I have not told many people. In the middle of all of this, in late November, when I was at my most exhausted and most brittle, when I was surviving on 4 hours of sleep and whatever was in the vending machine outside the Aldertons Business Center, I got a phone call from the head of our design team. His name is Jerome, and Jerome and I have worked together for 6 years, and he has the best eye for space of anyone I have ever met. He was calling about a fireplace installation in the Aldertons Library Lounge. There was a code issue, and the contractor needed a decision, and I needed to see it in person. I drove down to Providence on a Wednesday afternoon. Jerome met me in the library lounge, which at that point was mostly finished. Bookshelves, reading chairs, a bar set up in the corner, and he walked me through the fireplace situation, and I made the call, and the contractor said they could have it done by the end of the week. And then Jerome said, "You look terrible." "Thank you," I said. You still look put together. You always look put together, but you look like someone who is working very hard at looking put together. I looked at the unlit fireplace. My husband was embezzling from us, I said, and having an affair. I found out both at the same time. Jerome was quiet for a moment. He said, "Do you want me to get you something from the bar?" "I think they have actual snacks now." I laughed. I don't know why that was the thing that made me laugh, but it was. Jerome got me a bag of mixed nuts from behind the bar, and we sat in 2 of the reading chairs, while a contractor finished whatever he was doing in the other room. And Jerome told me about a terrible breakup he'd had in 2019 that involved a rental car and a stolen dog and a last-minute flight to Denver. And by the time I drove back to Boston, I felt for the first time in weeks like a human being. He called the next day to make sure I was all right. He called again 2 weeks later. He started texting, not constantly, but consistently. Jerome, who I had worked alongside for 6 years without ever quite seeing him the way I apparently should have been seeing him. It is now the end of March. The Alderton is 3 months into full operations and has a 4.7-star rating on every platform that matters. The fireplace in the library lounge is my favorite room in any property we own. I had dinner with Jerome last Friday. Not a work dinner, though we did spend about 20 minutes talking about a renovation project in Burlington, because we are who we are, but mostly we talked about other things. His family in Charleston, my grandmother's handkerchiefs, the book he's been trying to finish for 4 years, the way the light comes through the terrazzo lobby at exactly 6 p.m. in November and makes the whole room look like something out of a painting. "You should slow down sometime," he said. "Not quit, just stop long enough to actually be in the thing you're building." I thought about my grandfather. He worked until 2 weeks before he died. He never quite learned to stop either. I'm trying, I said. Jerome smiled. I know. That's why I said it. There is a version of this story that ends in fire and wreckage, and a dramatic courtroom scene, and a villain who gets exactly what they deserve in some spectacularly public way. Kelsey did not face any criminal charges. The vendor fraud was a civil matter, complicated and ultimately settled in a way that returned most of the money and removed her from our industry network permanently. It wasn't cinematic. It was paperwork. Harrison moved to Philadelphia. I don't know what he's doing there. I genuinely hope he is doing better than he was doing here. And I am still here. In my grandfather's company, in the properties he built, in the work he taught me to love before I was old enough to understand what that kind of love would cost me. Still here, walking into hotel lobbies at 7 a.m. with a laptop bag on one shoulder and a coffee. I'm trying not to spill. Still building. And sometimes, on a Friday evening, sitting across a table from someone who sees exactly what I'm doing and asks me very gently to stop. Just for an hour, just for the evening, I do. I stop. And it is enough.